How's everybody doing? Couple quick things before I get started. Christmas Eve. Um, as you've heard probably, we got the two services Christmas Eve and one service Christmas morning. And we're expecting quite a crowd for all three, and it messes up with our normal volunteer stuff. So if you're able to help with one of the services as a greeter, now you want have we given you the greeter test? Go like this and like this. And if you can do this, you have the basic, we have people who take it to another level, but you have that ability. You have the baseline ability to greet. And you might be saying, well, I want to be with my kids Christmas Eve. Well, guess what? One of the cooler things I find is being greeted by a family. A mom or a dad or both and a kid. That's cool. So if you could do that, especially the 7 o'clock or Sunday morning, those are both having trouble filling those with people. So it's a chance for you to really, just a 1 week commitment, but make a real difference in lives. And so sign up at the table in the back with Kevin back there after the service if you can squeeze in a little extra time on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning as a gift. Also, I'm challenging everybody, or many want to read the Bible through with me this coming year. And I've published a little book that has the stuff to do that. You can get the ebook right now at Amazon. I hope to have the paperback here by Christmas Eve. I don't know. That's the goal. That's what I'm praying for. You can get it on Amazon right now. It just costs $1 more than I'll charge because I get to bypass Amazon, and I can save you $1, but it's not that big a deal. Anyway, finally, one other thing. When Kim Schiffen was up here talking about Cambodia, she shared one little story that I wanted to share with you real quick. When she and her family had lived in Cambodia for a year, there was a little boy, young boy, who'd become friends with one of their sons. And it turned out after they left that he got into some stuff he shouldn't have got into, and into drugs and bad company, all that stuff. And when we got back over there, she was able to reach out to him and sort of help guide him back into a better path. And one of the things that's happened with the money that we've been able to send over there is our church has been able to finance for him to go to recovery. So he's over halfway through the program. He's doing great. His life looks like it's going to be totally transformed, and a lot of it has to do with the money that you guys, as the church, have sent over there. So when we say thank you, we're making a difference. It's because you're making a real, live, honest-to-goodness difference in that one specific life as well as many others. So I wanted you to understand about that. So, yeah, give yourself a hand. All right, I've mentioned this before. You may have caught on that we're screwed up. You've heard me say that before. Now, there's two components to our screwed upness. And the first is that we do things that are wrong. We do things that are wrong, we do them on purpose, and we go back and do them again. Okay? There's another component, though, to our screwed upness. And that is we know things we're supposed to do. We know things that we want to have that are valuable things, real valuable things, but we self-sabotage on our way to acquiring them. There'll be something we want. We want peace. We want joy. We want happiness. We want contentment. We want security. And we will then know we want it, and then we'll sabotage ourselves on the way to getting it. And that's another sign that we're screwed up. And there's believe it or not, in the Old Testament of the Bible, the top part written before Jesus, there is a name given to one of the self-sabotages that we use, and it's not what you're expecting. You say, what? It is the word idols. I mean, when we think of idols, we think of little statues that people bow down to. But in reality, an idol was just one symbol, one method that humans use to self-sabotage themselves to keep them from what they actually want. If you want to, you can turn on your Bible to Isaiah 44, and we're going to read a critique of idols. Now, he's critiquing specifically the physical idols, where they actually would make a statue and bow down to it. But we'll see in it the essence, the kernels of truth that define every idol, everything that we do that self-sabotages us, keeps us from the success and happiness that we want in life. Now, Isaiah 44, I'm going to start in verse 9. It says, "How foolish are those who manufacture idols. These prized objects are really worthless. The people who worship idols don't know this, so they're all put to shame. Who but a fool would make his own god? An idol that cannot help him one bit. All who worship idols will be disgraced, along with these craftsmen, mere humans who claim they can make a god. They may all stand together, but they'll stand in terror and shame." And now he's going to walk through walk backwards, actually, through the process of manufacturing an idol. He's going to walk through and see that in each case there's a problem. He starts out, verse 12 says, the blacksmith stands at his forge to make a sharp tool, pounding and shaking it with all his might. His work makes him hungry and weak. It makes him thirsty and faint. Now, you got to understand something about idols. Glad you came. I'm going to tell you how to make an idol. Because a lot of times if I say they made an idol, they made a statue, you think they made it out of gold. They have a solid gold statue. Well, not really. It's kind of like chocolate Easter bunnies. You know what I mean? Because chocolate Easter bunnies come in two kinds. And when you're buying your chocolate Easter bunnies, you're always trying to be careful, right? Because you got one kind, which is the solid chocolate all the way to the core Easter bunny, right? That's your primo Easter bunny right there, is the solid chocolate one. But you know there are an awful lot of them out there, what? That are the hollow ones. And they'll catch you. Why? Because the hollow ones are cheaper. Makes sense because chocolate costs money. If there's air in the middle, you're paying for air and not for chocolate. Now, let's say instead of making an Easter bunny, you want to make an idol, a statue. Which is cheaper? Have a statue that's made of solid gold or one that's made of something else with solid gold tacked on around the outside of it, gold-plated, which is cheaper? Oh, it's a whole lot cheaper if you take your time and carve out a wooden idol and then take gold plating and plate the outside, hammer the gold into place and form it so it looks like it's made of gold, but it's really gold, wood covered with gold. Does that make sense? And that's how they do it. And here's what he's saying, talking about the first part, is how, okay, the last stage of making the idol is they take the wood and they hammer the gold around it so that it looks all shiny. But it's really just made of wood, okay? Now, verse 13, we go to the step right before that. It says, the wood carver measures a block of wood and draws a pattern on it. He works with chisel and plane and carves into it a human figure. He gives it human beauty and puts it in a little shrine. So this is the carving part, where he takes this block of wood and he carves it into the shape of the idol. But you'll notice the human is in control the whole time. Now, then the last, which is actually the first stage, verse 14 says, he cuts down cedars, so it goes to the finest wood. He selects the cypress and the oak. He plants the pine in the forest to be nourished by the rain. He even plants the tree. Verse 15, this is the killer. Then he uses part of the wood to make a fire. With it he warms himself and bakes his bread. Then, yes, it's true, he takes the rest of it and makes himself a god to worship. He makes an idol and bows down in front of it. So what's his first part about? Guy goes out, he's going to make an idol. He's going to make a god to worship. So he goes out and he picks a good tree. Or maybe he planted a tree and let it grow up, and then he goes out and he goes to the tree, says, that tree will work, and he cuts it down, and he's got this big log in front of him. And what's he do? He says, I need this much to make an idol. Don't need the whole log. Just need this much. So he goes, that half looks better. So he chooses, walks over, gets his saw, saws it in half, takes this half and chops it up into kindling, and burns it in his furnace. He uses it to heat his house and to bake his food. And this part, he pulls out his chisel and transforms into a god. So he's had control of the entire process. Verse 16 says, he burns part of the tree to roast his meat and to keep himself warm, and says, that fire feels good. Then he takes what's left and makes his god, a carved idol. He falls down in front of it, this piece of wood that he chose and that he did all the work on. He falls down in front of it, worshiping and praying to it. Rescue me, he says, you are my God. Man, that is a critique, isn't it? Then he finishes up. Such stupidity and ignorance. Their eyes are closed and they cannot see. Their minds are shut and they cannot think. The person who made the idol never stops to reflect, well, it's just a block of wood. I burned half of it for heat and used it to bake my bread and roast my meat. How can the rest of it be a god? Should I bow down and worship a piece of wood? The poor deluded fool feeds on ashes. He trusts something that can't help him at all, yet he cannot bring himself to ask, is this idol that I'm holding in my hand a lie? Now, I know where you are right now. You're saying, that is a very good critique of making idols. Really good. Steve, I have never in my life bowed down to a statue. Now, there may be somebody who's from a Hindu background and you have, but I would say the overwhelming majority of the people in the room, you've never even considered it. If there was a store selling idols and they had them on sale today, you wouldn't buy one, you wouldn't consider buying one, and you would never even consider bowing down to one, right? So you're going, this doesn't apply to me at all. How about retell the story? So I've got this guy, and he spends years and years developing his skill set. He learns the skills and craft that he needs to do a good job. Could be any kind of job. But he works hard, does the schooling, takes the classes, everything it takes to get really good at what he does. And then he works. He goes to work every work day, and he works hard every day. He puts his all into it, and end of the day, he's spent from the labor he puts in. And then once a week, twice a month, once a month, whatever, either they hand him a check or some money shows up in his checking account, and they hand him a stub, and he takes the money that comes in, and he says, I'm going to use this portion here, and I'm going to pay my mortgage, and I'm going to buy food, and I've got a car payment. I'm going to pay my bills with this portion here. And this portion here, I'm going to take this portion, and I'm going to put it in savings. And this portion here, I'm going to use for fun. And I'm going to buy a big TV, and I'm going to set up a man cave. And I'm going to buy toys. I'm going to buy an ATV. I'm going to buy all the things that make me a little bit happy. Okay? And then he picks one of the two, because people tend to go in one of two directions. He takes the money that he is saving, and he says, this will keep me safe. This will protect me. I will do whatever it takes to defend this piece of money right here, because this money is what I'm serving. I am working all day to get money to put into this one so that I can retire okay, so that I can be secure and I can set my life stable. Or I'm going to spend my money on the fun section, because this will bring me joy. And he serves it. You know, in first service, it got quiet right there, too. Because it's one thing to talk about bowing down and worshiping a piece of wood. It's another when we recognize that we are fully capable of doing the exact same thing with other things in our lives. That we are capable of taking even something as good as working hard for a living and taking the money that we get and turning it into a God that we are asking for it to protect us and take care of us. And so we have that capacity to do that. What we're doing, what an idol is anytime we place our hope in something that cannot fulfill the expectation we place on it. Anytime we place our hope in something that cannot fulfill the expectation we place on it. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to identify in your life what your idols are. And I believe that as we go through this, you will discover that everyone in the room has at least one idol. Something that in your life you are putting your trust in, and it is going to defeat you, is going to sabotage your desire to be successful in life because it is not capable of doing what you want it to do. And the first thing you need to do, and we'll help you do this as we go through today, to identify your idols, is to recognize that idols are always exaggerated. We make them bigger than they really are. Verse 17 said, then he takes what's left and makes it his God, a carved idol. He falls down in front of it, worshiping and praying to it. Rescue me, he says, you are my God. And we laugh because, there's no way a piece of wood can rescue you. Well, there's no way a savings account can keep you safe. I mean, okay. How much money, what thing has to go wrong for your savings account to go away? Can you imagine something that would take it all away? Let's say you got a big savings account. Let's say you spent years and you got a retirement. Is it possible for it to go away? It's not even hard to figure it out. I can guarantee you that we can go down to Fayetteville and Spring Lake and we can find people who had a really, really nice savings account, had money put aside, and along came a hurricane, and they didn't think they needed flood insurance, And every bit of that savings and security they were wanting to get from it is gone because they put their hope in something that they had exaggerated its ability to meet that hope. Does that make sense? Now, here's the thing. I don't care if you've caught on to this yet. There are things that are bad that can become idols. Some people make sex an idol. Some people make power and running over other people an idol. But some people take really good things and make them idols. The amazing one in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 9 in the New Testament, it says that the gifts and sacrifices the priests offer, I'll read to you and I'll explain it to you. The gifts and sacrifices the priests offer are not able to cleanse the consciences of the people who bring them. Now here's what he's saying. God set up this plan in the Old Testament where they would bring sacrifices into the temple as part of their worship. And that would work toward the forgiveness of their sins. And what he said is, here's the problem. You can go through the whole process of doing that, but it's not going to take away your guilt because the sacrifice itself is incapable of clearing you of guilt. In other words, catch this. If you sub the sacrifice for something else, the very sacrifices of the Old Testament can become an idol. You can go to the temple of God and worship an idol because you turned the sacrifices into something they're not. Because the sacrifices would cleanse you of sin, but only God can do the guilt thing, can get rid of your guilt. And you're expecting the sacrifice to do something it cannot do. So you can have very good things that become idols. I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago. A woman came up to me after the service, and I talked about looking for your purpose and finding your purpose in life. And she started telling me about her job. She'd just gotten a new job just a few months ago. She loved it. She had gone from a place where she didn't think she was making an impact, where she wasn't allowed to talk about her faith. It was just a real stressful place. And she had moved to a place where she could share her faith freely and where she could see she was making such a difference in the lives of people, and she was ecstatic about it. She was vibrating. You know when somebody's really excited, they vibrate? They tell you about something, and they're just so excited, they just can't help it. They're just like, and then she shifted. And she said, only problem. We have a goal to be debt-free. And when I took this new job, I also took a huge pay cut. And it's making it almost impossible for us to even think about becoming debt-free. We're not going to be able to get out of debt as long as I'm doing this. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And it just popped out of my mouth. You know, sometimes getting out of debt can become an idol. It can be something that takes the place. You have this idea that if you get out of debt, you're secure. You're safe. Again, ask the people who hurricane hit. Are they secure? Were they safe? No. You're saying, I want this thing. Now, getting out of debt is a wonderful thing. If you're understanding by getting out of debt, that enables me to do more ministry, to be more flexible, to have less stress in my life. There are lots and lots of benefits of not having debt. But debt will not produce security and satisfaction in your life. Because how do you get in debt? Well, there's three ways. One is, actually, sometimes debt is a good financial decision. If you're buying a house, most of us don't have the kind of money laying around to just shell that out. So leveraging debt is not a terrible thing. Some debt we come into because we make dumb decisions, right? We suddenly decide we need that specific TV or that specific car, and we go into debt for something we didn't need to go into debt for, right? But what's the other reason you go into debt? Life happens. You've got money set aside for a rainy day, and you get a monsoon. Right? You got a little bit in savings, and your HVAC goes out. And that's $6,000, and you can handle $2,000. You need a new roof. Something big happens, and suddenly you're in debt, not because anything you did wrong, it's just you didn't have enough money, you weren't ready for that, so something unexpected happens. So let me see, will being out of debt make sure nothing bad ever happens to you again? Will being out of debt make sure your roof never gets a leak? Does that mean your HVAC will last until eternity? No. And if something happens, so all it takes, if you're leaning toward being debt-free as the source of your security and freedom, you're looking at something that cannot provide that what you're hoping it will provide. Does that make sense? Let's just keep on the mean scale. Some people, their family is an idol. Some of you have this belief that if you can get your family absolutely perfect, it will bring you joy and satisfaction, and your problems will go away. And there's two problems with that. Number one, your family is made up of your kids. And where did they get that at? From you. So, your kids are never going to be perfect because you're not. So you're going to have screwed up kids because it's in your DNA, and you're going to pass that to your children. Okay? And so if you say, if we can get our family perfect, then life will be wonderful and perfect and amazing, and your family's never going to be perfect. And you're stuck there because you've made it an idol. And you're saying, if I can get my kids perfect, if I can get my spouse perfect, if we can get our marriage absolutely perfect, then my life will be great. I'll have joy and peace and harmony and love. And again, you're never going to get your spouse perfect. It's really simple. Remember this. Write this down. If my spouse were perfect, they never would have married me. Okay? This is not complex. This is not rocket science here. And you're saying, I want this to provide this in my life, and it's not capable of providing that in my life. Some of you are saying, if I just give my kids the right presents, they'll love me. Presents don't produce love. Admiration a little bit. They get excited, not love. So you're asking something. So you need to identify these things that you're exaggerating, that you're saying, oh, I'll give you this one too. This one, I don't like this one. I know of people who are like serving in a church as like maybe, I don't know, lead pastor. And their idea can become, if I can get our church to be the perfect church, then I'll have success and joy as a person. And I got a screwed up church because they're like their pastor. And I can place that expectation and say, if I can get the church perfect, then I'll have joy. I'll have satisfaction. I'll have hope. I'll have all these things. I've exaggerated what can happen. So I have to tell myself that. I have to say, okay, that's exaggerated. And then I have to recognize that idols in my life are impotent. Verse 20 said, the poor deluded fools feed on ashes. He trusts something that cannot help him at all. Psalm 115 talks about that. It says they're idols, the things that we put up there that we say can make us satisfied. Our silver and gold made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, noses but cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throats. So I will get love from my money. How many times have you heard money say it loves you? How many times have you had money comfort you? Bring you joy? Maybe happiness for a little bit. Matter of fact, there's always the picture. You've seen it in movies, they do it and all this stuff, where somebody gets a lot of money, they usually rob a bank or something. And they end up with all this money, and they throw it on the bed, and they like swim around on the money in the bed, and they're all happy. You ever notice they only do that once? Never have I seen the time when they replace their bed with a pile of money. Because it turns out, when you're wanting to be comfortable, money doesn't win that game over mattresses and pillows and blankets. And so they do it once, and it was like, that was fun, but it really didn't make me happy. It didn't bring me contentment. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring me love. So why don't I take this and put it in a pile over here, and I'll go back to a regular bed, which at least makes me comfortable. So idols are exaggerated, they're impotent, and this might be the worst part. Idols are actually inhibitors. Not only do they not provide us with what we think they should give us, they block us from getting it. Because they can be substitutes. It says, the verse we read was, how foolish are those who manufacture idols. They're really worthless. The people who worship idols don't know this, so they're put to shame. Now, when they say put to shame, what's the purpose of an idol if you're worshiping? One of the purposes is for it to make you not feel shame. For it to take away your shame and your guilt. And what's the idol do? It makes you full of shame. So you can have this, and you think it's going to be cool, but the idol can't produce for you. All the stuff you have doesn't bring joy. You ever notice, how big a TV do you need? Just a couple inches bigger. Right? How many channels do you have to have? Just a couple more. How new does your car need to be? Just a couple years. You ever notice that every one of these things that we make as idols and that it's never enough? That every time you get it, you're just going, what's next? If power is one of your things, you like to be in control, you like to move up the ladder, you like success, which promotion is the best one that makes you not want any more? Next one up. Man, if I could just make E whatever I am plus 1. Or O whichever I am plus 1. That's all it would take for me to be satisfied until I actually get that plus 1. And then what do I need? Plus 1 more. Okay? So they'll never satisfy us. They're completely impotent. And we think they're going to do it, and we substitute them, and then we find out we're not happy. And even worse, they can actually slow us down. They can actually make it so we never get there. You can have the person who says, you know what, if we could just be debt-free, we'd be completely happy. And that person spends all their energy and all their time trying to pay off every bill that they can, and they take all the fun out of their lives, and they totally don't enjoy life, and they're miserable because they're trying to be happy. Or you can look at your family and say, man, if I just had the perfect family, if I could just get, I can't imagine a parent doing this, but I've heard of parents doing this, where the child brings home the report card, and it's pretty good, and the only grade you mention is which one? The one that's not as good as the rest of them. Yeah, I'm talking about you. You know, there's an A plus, and the teacher wrote perfect beside it, and then there's a B. What's the deal with this B? Is that a little too close to home? And here's the thing. We're so busy pursuing perfect family that we don't enjoy real family. That we don't appreciate what we actually have because we're so busy trying to get the next one. And that idol that we've produced hinders us and stops us from getting what we actually want. Okay? I think I want rid of these. How do you eliminate these idols in your life? Now that you're starting to identify them, and hopefully you'll touch on the uncomfortable side because you realize that you had thought idols were just things you do that are wrong, and you realize you can have things that are good that you turn into an idol because you put it in the wrong place. How do you get rid of your idols? Well, first off, you got to name it. You eliminate your idols by naming them. Admit that it's become an idol. Verse 20 had said this, yet he cannot bring himself to ask, is this idol that I'm holding in my hand a lie? Because it's hard to admit that. If you've spent the last 20 years working to get that ultimate promotion and to get all the skills and all the degrees and all the things it takes to get that next step, and you're right on the edge of getting that next step, and you recognize, I have spent 20 years pursuing an idol, it's hard to look at that and say, oh crap, that's an idol. If I've spent years and years and years accumulating a security blanket of finances, a retirement account so I don't have to worry, and I've spent all my life accumulating that, and then to turn around and call it what it is, that's hard. But Romans 1:25 says, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served something created instead of the Creator. So in order, once you name it, once you start that tentative process of saying, This thing in my life has become an idol. It's becoming me sabotaging myself. Once you name it, you need to tame it. You tame it by acknowledging the limits of what it can accomplish in your life. We read it earlier. Their eyes are closed, they cannot see. Their minds are shut, they cannot drink. See, these things that you have, newsflash, they're things. They're stuff. They were created. Now, we are never intended to serve anything that has been created, because nothing that's being created has the power to do any good in our lives. Genesis 1:28 says, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it." See, idols reduce us. It's pretty terrible, doesn't it? Sound pretty terrible when you've taken something created and now you're worshiping it, you're serving it, you're building your life around it, you're taking your vacation time to go get it. Isn't that sad when there's something in your life that you are devoting your life to and it doesn't even know you exist? It's incapable of knowing you exist. Your bank account has no knowledge of you. Your TV's mood does not change if you're watching it, not watching it, or watching a rom-com. It does not care. Your car can sit in the parking lot. It can sit in the car salesman's lot. It can sit in the junkyard. It can get smushed into a box this big of metal, and it really doesn't give a rip. Especially not about you. And you need to tame it to say, that's what that is. That's something that has no value. And I think even worse, God wants us to use our brains. He wants our brains to be, the Word. God is the Word. God is logic. And we're being so illogical that we're looking at stuff that can't do any good and we're serving it. And we're reducing ourselves. So what are we going to do? There's the last step, and this is the step that actually matters. We have to name it and tame it, and boy, I wish I knew another word that rhymed that I could put in there. I need an app for that, but I couldn't do it. Because what we have to do next, this is close, we have to replace it. See, you've got this idol and you've placed it on a pedestal that it can't maintain, and you've got to take it off the pedestal and then replace it with something that actually has the ability to do what you want done. There's a really cool psalm that a lot of people know. You probably heard this psalm if you've been around church at all. And it starts out, we don't fully understand what it's saying. Psalm 121 starts out, "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from?" And sometimes I know people think, my help comes from the mountains. Well, that's what the Israelites thought. Israel, if you know, is a hilly country. And what they did was they developed the reputation of hill fighters, mountain fighters. If you wanted to fight Israel, step one was to lure them out of the mountains. Because if you try to fight Israel in the mountains, they'll kick your butts. They know the terrain. They're good on hills. They're West Virginians. Don't mess with us on the hills, because we got legs that are adjusted to that. So don't mess with us up there. And there was this thought, the other nations, you'll see it in the Bible, where they say, let's lure them down into the valley where they're on flat ground and we can beat them. And what happened was the Israelites started to believe that. They started to believe the mountains were where their help was. If they wanted to win a battle, their job was to lure you up onto the hilltop where they could take you. And he says, where does my help come from? I'm looking to the mountains. Where does my help come from? And the next verse says, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. See, there's only one person, only one thing you can put on the pedestal that actually will accomplish what you're wanting to get from your money or your debt relief or your perfect family or whatever else it is that you've made into an idol. Matter of fact, this passage in Isaiah started by telling us that, but I wanted to save it as a surprise. Surprised? Verse 6. This is what the Lord says, Israel's King and Redeemer, the Lord of heaven's armies. Lord of heaven's armies. I am the first and the last. There is no other God. Who is like me? Let him step forward and prove to you his power. Let him do as I have done since ancient times, when I established a people and explained its future. Do not tremble, do not be afraid. Did I not proclaim my purposes to you long ago? You are my witnesses. Is there any other God? No, there is no other rock, not one. So if you're going to replace it, you start out by putting God back in his place. See, what you've actually done is you've taken something that only God can provide for you, and you've tried to find a substitute. You've taken out the sugar and you've put in Splenda. And it ain't the same thing. Right? Can I get an amen? Right? More to the point. You have taken out the turkey and you've made a tofu bird, which, as you know, will satisfy no one. There's no satisfaction there. There's no hope. There's no joy. There's no peace. There's none of that stuff. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In Galatians 5, it says this. This fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. What are you really looking for in life? Are you looking for money? Do you really think you want money? Or do you want love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? I want that list. I'm looking for my stuff to provide me with this. I'm looking for my family to provide me with this. I am looking for my job to provide me with this. I'm looking for my position, for my debt-freeness. For some people even, I'm looking for sex. I'm looking for something to provide me with this. And what did that just say? The fruit of God's Spirit is these things. Love comes from God. Peace comes from, I don't know, the Prince of Peace. Hope comes from God. Joy comes, are you seeing this? You have taken God off his pedestal and replaced him with something that you can control. But the reality that you can control it means it doesn't have the power to do anything in your life. The fact that you sawed it up and chose which half to burn and which part to make into an idol means it doesn't have the power to do any good in your life. Pleasure as an idol. All these things, and we take God off his pedestal and we put whatever that is there. And we're looking for love and joy and peace. And God says, that comes from me. You're looking in the wrong place. You're looking for an okay thing. It's good to look for love. It's good to look for joy. It's good to look for peace. It's good to look for patience. It's good to look for these things. You will not get them from anything created, from any of these things that you imagine. That's how this passage ends. It says, pay attention, O Jacob, for you are my servant. O Israel, I, the Lord, made you, and I will not forget you. Now that's security. My savings account will never be able to say that. I, the Lord, made you, and I will not forget you. Verse 22, I have swept away your sins like a cloud. That'd be about guilt, wouldn't it? And the guilt I'm trying to get rid of. I'm trying to outrun. He says, I've swept away your sins like a cloud. I've scattered your offenses like the morning mist. Oh, return to me, for I have paid the price to set you free. What's the price? It's Christmas. You can figure this out. It was Jesus, right? God says, you are pursuing all these things and you're chasing them, but I sent Jesus to live the life and pay the price for what you've already done so that you can have that relationship with me, so that now I can provide you with love and joy and peace. And we're like people, and we walk into this big mall, and there's all these little stores everywhere. And this one's selling possessions, and this one's selling power, and this one's selling sex, and this one's selling all these other things. And we're running around the mall looking for love and joy and peace. And we go into this store and we try it, and we try it, and we try it, and we walk out with nothing because there's nothing there that we want. And we go into the next store and the next store and the next store. And sometimes we'll go and we'll buy everything they got, and we bring it out, and we realize, I went in shopping. You ever done that? You go in shopping for one thing and bring home something totally different? And we walk into this store looking for love, joy, and peace, and we bring out a television. We go looking for love, joy, and peace, walk into this store, and we bring out a promotion. We go into this store, and we bring out some people, and in the middle of the store, the mall, there's one little kiosk in the middle. And there's a guy sitting at that one. Got a little banner over his booth. Sitting there with a beard and sandals and a robe. And over his booth it says what he's selling. It says, I have come, John 10:10, that they may have life and have it to the full. And we're so busy scurrying from room to room, from store to store, coming out with more stuff and more money and more power and more all the things that we think are going to work in that place. And we're looking for life and life to the full. We're looking for love and joy and peace and gentleness and all that wonderful stuff. And we ignore the booth in the middle. And we leave the mall with lots and lots of stuff and nothing we went there looking for, because we have exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than our Creator. I hope you're uncomfortable. I'm probably not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to make you feel good, right? I hope you're uncomfortable. Because as long as you have one or more of these idols in your life, I don't want you comfortable with that. I don't want you comfortable thinking it's okay for me to take God off His platform and put something up there that will not satisfy me and go through your life with the dissatisfaction that comes from seeking something you'll never find. All the while, to shift analogies, Jesus says, I stand at the door and I knock. So if you are a follower of Christ, I hope you're uncomfortable. I hope God has shaken your world just a little bit today. I hope there's something in your life that you were perfectly content with the way you had it, and you realize now, as we've talked, that you have an idol there. And I hope you're uncomfortable enough to do something about it. And it may be that you're here today and you don't even have the relationship we started with. And you recognize today, may have heard it 1,000 times, today you recognize it. You need to talk to somebody about that. And you've been here more than once, you know how this works. If you want to talk to somebody about a relationship with Christ, all we ask you to do is to grab one of these blue bags. There's some at both corners of the platform and some back there on those bookshelves. And if you grab a blue bag, we'll hook you up with somebody after the service who's trained. They'll take about 10 minutes. They'll walk you through the contents of the bag, and they'll tell you about the first step in taking whatever those idols are off the shelf and putting God there. Now, it could be you're ready to be baptized. You've already accepted Christ. You need to make that statement. We do that the first Wednesday of every month. If you want to just let us know about that, we'll be glad to hook you up with that. And maybe as we've talked today, you've been reminded of what Christ did for you. You want to remind yourself of it. We have communion stations, one in the front, one in the back, where you can take communion just to remind yourself of all that God did for you. Maybe you want to pray about something God's just laid on your heart, or you're carrying a burden of some kind you want to pray about. We have a cross over there, and that's the purpose of that is a place for you to pray. During this next song, if you want to go pray or take communion and then pray, whatever, that's what we're encouraging you to do. If you want to pray with somebody or somebody to pray with you, we've got some people here and over here too, some people that will be glad to, standing against the wall, be glad to pray with you. Just tell them what you want to pray about. But no matter what, I have trouble imagining, I could be wrong, but I bet the overwhelming majority of you are currently aware of one of the idols in your life, at least one. And I want you to do what we just talked about doing. I want you to name it. I want you to name it. I want you to look it square in the eye and say, I have been treating that as an idol. I've exaggerated something impotent and given it a power it can't have and it shouldn't have in my life. And I want to name that, and I want to tame that. I want to point out why it cannot ever give me what I'm expecting it to give me. I'm just getting dissatisfaction in my life because I'm serving this idol. I want you to name it, I want you to claim it, and I want you to begin the process of replacing it. I'm not saying that's going to be easy, because a lot of times what we find out is we've been serving an idol for years and years and years, and taking it off the pedestal is not easy. Very few things of actual value are easy. The dude walks up to a log and he looks at it. He says, I'm going to turn that part into a god. I'm going to burn this half. And we walk up to our finances. I'm going to turn that part into a god. And I'm going to burn this part. We walk up to our relationships and we say, I'm going to turn this part into a god, and I'm going to burn this part. We walk up to our possessions and say, I'm going to turn this part into a god, and I'm going to burn this part. And what I'm asking you to do is to look at that part that you have turned into a god, and I want you to name it, and I want you to tame it, and I want you to replace it.